Welcome to the Saturday Cadence Podcast. I'm Blake Biscardi, and remember, the Saturday Cadence Podcast is the heartbeat of college football. Week 9 of the college football season was pretty stale across the slate. However, we have big news. LSU is moving off of Brian Kelly. That means Brian Kelly has been fired from LSU. They moved quickly after that game against Texas A&M at night in Death Valley. Tough scenes in Baton Rouge. Welcome into Saturday Cadence. My name is Blake Biscardi. This is the heartbeat of college football. We've got some things to talk about on the show today. This coaching carousel continues to churn and move at a rapid pace. More is coming, as we have told you every single week. This is a move that we have hinted on this show. It has widely been speculated when it would happen. Brian Kelly out at LSU. What does this mean? This means that LSU is immediately the number one job available on the job market. This means that LSU has an opportunity to right its wrongs. Brian Kelly was never a good fit there. He didn't seem to just get it. There's something different about Louisiana culture and LSU football that Brian Kelly just never seemed to fully buy into, never seemed to fully step into. And it's been clear. I mean, we know he has the big game issues, but even before the big game issues, he just didn't get it as the coach of LSU. And now he is out. So a national coaching search is going to start, and I believe it's going to begin with Lane Kiffin, who's going to be the hottest name on this market and could potentially end up being the highest paid coach in college football based on supply and demand. But when we're looking at Brian Kelly and these big game issues, you know, it was something for LSU where they couldn't win that season opener. And then you know what? This year they finally did. He had Jaden Daniels, a Heisman winning quarterback. They've beaten Alabama on the final play in fireworks. They've had some good wins, but he didn't do enough. LSU didn't make the playoff. And then this year, you have these expectations. Blake Baker comes in, defensive coordinator to second year. The defense is looking better. You have a veteran quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier. You have good pieces on your offensive side. And you know what? You win the season opener. You go into Clemson in the Battle of Death Valleys and in the Battle of Tigers, and you win a season opener. Finally, it looked like the tables were going to turn. People were saying this is the number one team in the country. Pause. That's why we don't overreact to those early season results. That's why we don't read into preseason polls. Because I heard people saying, not on this show, but I heard people saying LSU, that's the number one team in the country just because they went into Clemson. We didn't have enough data to know how good Clemson was. We didn't have enough data to know how good LSU was. But because they won a season opener, they did something they hadn't done, all of a sudden it's this real high praise. It's week 9. We are sitting here on October 27th, and Brian Kelly was fired on October 26th. 8-9 weeks removed from saying that's the number one team in the country. And folks said it for a couple weeks. So for Brian Kelly and for LSU, this is a tough spot to be in. He couldn't win the big games. Clemson's not as good. If you're sitting there as a Tigers fan seeing how this season went, right? You beat Clemson to start. You jump out to a 4-0 start. People were talking about the defense. Then you go to Ole Miss and you lose. You know what? Okay, teams lose. Ole Miss is a good football team, right? You beat South Carolina. Then you lose to Vanderbilt. Then you lose to Texas A&M. That's 3 of the last 4 games you lose. Right? 2 of those losses are on the road. But what's really interesting with this A&M game, it didn't look like LSU had it. It looked like at halftime they were winning the game at halftime. They forced 2 turnovers in the first half. There was juice in that stadium. It was 18-14. Then that second half came, you could just feel it change. Texas A&M was outplaying LSU, but Texas A&M made mistakes. You knew the better football team on Saturday night. You knew the better team was Texas A&M. 49-25. You mean to tell me that you're up 18-14 at the half and you score one more touchdown, but you lose 49-25? They gave up. It was over. Much like James Franklin and Penn State, looked like he lost the locker room. Brian Kelly lost the locker room. I'm not sure that he ever really had the locker room. And that's what was really tough about his tenure at LSU, because it felt like you were trying to fit a square peg in a round hole the entire time, whether it was recruiting videos, whether it was press conferences, whether it was relationship building, whether it was connecting with the state of Louisiana and the fan base. It just never seemed to connect. And it's over. Will Brian Kelly coach again? Probably. He's got a 50-something million buyout. Again, some of these numbers are rough figures. But for LSU, this coaching search now, you are the best job available. So you can have your pick. Lane Kiffin wanted that job in 2021, didn't get it. They hired Brian Kelly. Lane seems to be the best option for LSU right now. LSU can throw some big money at some coaches. I think the only coaches that are not going to move, I think, are Ryan Day, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, Kalen DeBoer, and Steve Sarkisian. I think those 5 coaches will not leave their schools to go to LSU. That's not to say none of those coaches won't retire or go to the NFL. But what I'm saying to you is those are the coaches that are off the table, in my opinion, for the LSU job. I think Dan Lanning could be in play for LSU. You have to think the recruiting hotbed that LSU sits on in the South, in Louisiana, the winning tradition they have at LSU. And that's since Saban and then Les Miles. And then we had Ed Orgeron and now Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly was the worst of those 4 coaches in terms of record. LSU is the best job available, and it's not close. Florida, I think, will be the second best job available. Penn State, the third best job available. And what's getting more and more interesting by the day for Penn State is this cycle on this coaching carousel is it's going to be harder and harder the more programs that let go of a head coach to find their guy. Because when Penn State moved off of James Franklin first, okay, Penn State's open. This is big. This is huge. Then Florida does. And you're like, ooh, okay, we have a 1A and a 1B situation here. Now LSU did. So now if you're Penn State, you're the third most desirable job because Florida and LSU are both sitting on talent hotbeds. They're both in the South. They're easier places to recruit to. You have easier access to those places. Resources are good. And not that resources aren't good at Penn State, because they are. It's tough to recruit to the middle of the state of Pennsylvania. You're sitting in the backwoods in the mountains. I mean, State College, Penn State is State College. State College is Penn State. You have to go there to understand. So it will make it more difficult for Penn State because there's other factors that are becoming in play. Penn State is one of the top jobs in the sport. It's not the top job. It's not a top 5 job. Penn State's a good job. But you're Penn State getting rid of James Franklin. I don't know if the candidate is going to be out there with all these moves that are having that you're going to hire better than James Franklin. LSU could hire better than Brian Kelly, but there's no guarantees. That's the art of this coaching search and making these moves and paying the big buyouts. What's the motive for letting it go? What are you getting after? Because I do think that part of Brian Kelly's problem at LSU was not that he couldn't win football games. He just didn't get it. If he got it, if LSU hires a coach that gets it, and they're the same level of coach as Brian Kelly, but they get it, they would win more football games. They would recruit at a higher level. They would contend for national championships and SEC championships. And that should be in reverse order: SEC championships and national championships. That's the big takeaway for me is LSU needs to go find a coach that gets it. Brian Kelly's one of the better coaches in the country. He's a top 10 coach, but he didn't get it. He was more interested in Brian Kelly. If they hire Lane Kiffin, would Lane Kiffin get it? Because if Lane Kiffin gets it, they're going to win in Baton Rouge. So we can play this game of who are they going to hire. I think that LSU's top candidate is Lane Kiffin. I think Florida's top candidate is also Lane Kiffin. I think Lane Kiffin would choose LSU personally, which relegates now Florida to say, okay, do we zero in on James Franklin? Do we go after Alex Golish? Do we go after John Summerall? These are some of the names that are going to float out there. Does Will Stein take a head coaching job? Offensive coordinator at Oregon. Then there's a report that has been denied by the agent and the head coach of Steve Sarkisian being interested in NFL offers. Let's say Texas also opens. Texas and LSU are two top 5 jobs in college football, both open at the same time. Also open with Florida, also open with Penn State. This coaching carousel is going to be wild. It already is, but I think it has another level of wild to get to. So that's the Brian Kelly talk and the LSU talk. Let's look at Texas A&M because Texas A&M won the game, and we need to talk about them, not just the shortcomings of Coach Kelly and the LSU Tigers, who are now sitting at 5-3, 2-3 in conference play. Texas A&M is sitting at 8-0. They are undefeated in SEC play with 5 wins, 49-25, basically hanging a 50 burger in Death Valley. That's really tough to do. Marcel Reed, 310 yards of total offense, 4 touchdowns, did have the 2 interceptions. He's been playing really well quietly. Texas A&M, I think, is the quietest undefeated team in the country. I've been thinking about this of what teams can win the national championship. How many of them can win the national championship? How many of them can play with Ohio State? I do think that Texas A&M can. And Texas A&M going into Death Valley and winning was a telltale sign. I think Texas A&M is going to be in the playoff. They go to Missouri in 2 weeks. They have South Carolina at home, Samford, and then they go to Texas on the Friday after Thanksgiving to end the season. Huge rivalry game. I think Texas A&M goes 3-1, and I think they make the college football playoff, and I think they go to Atlanta to play for the SEC championship game. That's a good football team. Mike Elko has done an outstanding job as the head coach at A&M in a short time, getting the ship right and winning football games and doing it with toughness. They can do it in multiple different ways. You have a dynamic and athletic quarterback. And Texas A&M, their defense is also very good. So A&M, this is a team to keep your eye on. They could potentially win the SEC. And I know we're going to sit here and talk about the Alabamas of the world, the Georgias of the world, potentially even Ole Miss. Texas A&M, the quietest undefeated team in the country. I'm going to go to Alabama now. I think Alabama's another team that could win the national championship. I think Alabama could match up with Ohio State. I think Alabama needs a little bit of help, though. And I don't mean they need help around the country to get there. I mean, I think Alabama needs to step into another gear. You can say, well, Blake, they've just won 5 straight SEC games, including 4 straight ranked games. I'm not totally sold on the SEC being this far and away gauntlet of a conference. Yeah, tough games on there. I think there's more mid teams in the SEC than there are contending teams in the SEC. I think Georgia has holes. on the backside of their defense. I love the Kirby Smart factor. I love the Georgia G, but I think they have holes on the defense. I think Tennessee has holes. I think Ole Miss has holes. I think your two best teams in the SEC are Texas A&M and Alabama. Order still to be determined. I think that will be the SEC championship game. Ty Simpson has been playing as good as any quarterback in the country. Alabama got hit in the mouth against South Carolina. Alabama struggled. They got down in the second half. They weren't executing. They went 3-and-out a couple times in a row. It's tough. That part of their schedule was difficult. I'm not trying to undersell it. It was a difficult stretch of their schedule. They survived. They're 5-0 in that stretch. Alabama's a good football team. They're playing well. Kalen DeBoer has this team operating optimally. They're going to be in the playoff. And they have a good resume. I would personally rank different teams in the AP poll, which we can get to that AP poll at a later time because they continued to just be illogical in their rankings of certain teams or not ranking certain teams. Illogical, irrational. I don't understand the thinking, but we'll get to that later. Alabama, though, the defense is good enough. The offense can score. So Alabama and Texas A&M, I think those are the two best teams in the SEC, but I would caution you on just how much we award benefit of the doubt to the SEC. I get that they've earned benefit of the doubt over the last couple of years, or I shouldn't say couple of years, over the last decade and a half. I get the benefit of the doubt, the equity that's been built up by the Southeastern Conference. But in this NIL era, I do think the balance of power has shifted. I'm not saying the Big Ten is what the SEC used to be. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the top end of the Big Ten is better than the top end of the SEC. And the SEC, the competitive balance is closer together. But that doesn't mean just because the competitive balance is closer together that those teams are better. It's more regression to the mean than raising the average. So that's my thoughts on Alabama. Vanderbilt continues to win football games. Clark Lee, what they've done, they're climbing in now to the top 10, not just number 10. They're up to number 9 now in the AP poll. Vanderbilt, are we talking about playoff Vandy? Is that what we're going to be talking about here in November and December? And I'm here to tell you, yeah, we are going to be talking about playoff Vandy. Can they get in the playoff? They're sitting at 7-1. I'm going to tell you Vanderbilt's schedule. Diego Pavia continues to play well. They go to Texas on Saturday. This is a noon game. Vanderbilt goes to Texas. They win this game. They are in the playoff, in my opinion. Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee. Outside of Texas, that's their schedule. It's going to be tough to win a game in Knoxville. Vanderbilt needs to go 3-1 to get into the playoff in these last 4 games. I think that they can do it. I'm not going to declare them a playoff team, but I think they can. Would I be surprised if they go 2-2? I would not. But I think they can. So we will see if they do. Missouri now falls to 6-2. I think Missouri's a little bit overrated. But Vanderbilt gets it done at home. This is a tough spot dynamics-wise next week against Texas. That's the game that I think they lose. This is a tough scene dynamics-wise for Vanderbilt because look at these last couple of games. This is my cautionary tale to you. This is why you always have to look at schedules in college football. Okay, Vanderbilt, their last 3 games, there was a bye week sandwiched in between the first 2. Alabama, bye week, LSU, Missouri, Texas. That's a tough 4-game stretch. This is the dynamic spot for Vanderbilt. It's against them. Can they will their way to victory? Can they find a W? Texas is reeling. Texas was struggling against Mississippi State. They had to come back from being down 17 points in the fourth quarter, and they did it, and they won the game in overtime. A really tough dynamic spot for Clark Lee's team. But we're going to see what metal's inside that team. We are going to see the metal that is inside this team. Another big game here that we talked about was Ole Miss, Oklahoma. So Ole Miss, they needed a win. This was a tough spot for them. I liked Ole Miss in the game. Trinidad Chambliss, 315 yards. So Oklahoma has the second best defense in the country. And the concern was, okay, you're coming off of Georgia. How are you going to go facing a really, really good defense? Can you score? They did. That gave Ole Miss a lot of points in my book. They won the game. That gives them even more points because they got a win. It wasn't just okay, I can respect Ole Miss, but they were going up against a good defense and they lost. No. Ole Miss is a team that needed to win this game, and they played well and they did it. So when you're seeing Ole Miss now, as it relates to this SEC race and this conference championship race, they're absolutely in play to get to Atlanta and to get to the college football playoff. This was their trickiest game remaining on their schedule because now Ole Miss is sitting there with South Carolina coming to town this Saturday. They play the Citadel, they play Florida, and then they have the Egg Bowl the day after Thanksgiving. Ole Miss could easily be 4-0 there and finish 11-1. Easily. But what's the problem with Ole Miss's schedule? I just talked about Texas A&M and Alabama going to Atlanta. What if they all finish 11-1? How would this break down? Well, we have to remember Alabama lost to Florida State, which means they don't have a conference loss. Texas A&M is undefeated. They lose one game, they'd have one conference loss. Ole Miss has a conference loss, but Ole Miss doesn't play Texas A&M. Ole Miss doesn't play Alabama. This is the part of conference expansion, one of the parts, let me rephrase that, where it's going to be difficult. Why shouldn't Ole Miss go to the conference championship game? It's because of tiebreakers. Okay, so we have a conference that's this big with this many good teams that I'm being told we have this many good teams. You have 3 teams that are 11-1. We're going to sit at tiebreakers. That's tough. So I think those playing games will be a good model for these bigger conferences to go to because they're all deserving. So just because of whatever the tiebreaker is that was determined by administration, that's going to determine who goes instead of actually seeing an on-field result. Tough. So I don't know what those tiebreakers are. We will research them when the time comes in November. There's no sense we talk enough hypotheticals and enough about rankings, enough about projections on the show. We don't need to get into, well, if this happens, now we're going to add tiebreakers into it. Tiebreakers, I think, may come into play in the SEC with how this is going. That's my thoughts on Ole Miss. I think that they are going to be a playoff team, and I think they can make some noise. They need to figure out that defense, but I do think Ole Miss can win a game. Maybe 2, depending on the matchup. They're going to be very matchup dependent in the bracket and who they get. Looking around the country some more. Cincinnati, quietly one of the better teams in the Big 12, quietly making noise. Cincinnati is a team. Brandon Sorsby at quarterback. Keep your eye on the Bearcats in the Big 12 race. The Bearcats right now, okay? 7-1, undefeated in Big 12 play at 5-0. Remaining schedule, College Game Day is going to be in town. This is a 7:15 local kick in Provo. Cincinnati is going to Utah. Huge game for the Big 12 race. Huge. Then they have Arizona, BYU, and TCU. We're going to see what Cincinnati's made of. Cincinnati could be a team that gets to the Big 12 championship game and maybe crashes the playoff party if they are able to win the conference. Keep your eye on Cincinnati. They are quietly one of those better teams in the country. I told you, Texas survived against Mississippi State, having to mount a big comeback. Illinois went to Washington, and DeMond Williams rolled right over that defense of Illinois. Rolled. Washington is a good football team. Washington should be ranked. I don't know how many times I have to say that they should be ranked. I know they didn't have a great showing against Michigan last week and they lost. So you're telling me that your losses are to Ohio State and to Michigan, and you cannot be ranked? Sitting at 6-2 in the Big Ten. I don't understand the logic from some of these voters, but Washington, they play Wisconsin, Purdue, UCLA. Washington's going to be 9-2 when Oregon comes into town. Washington, hot take express here, is going to have a win and in game against the Ducks for the college football playoff on November 29th. And they could win that game and they could get in the playoff. If you want a team off the beaten path to take to get to the playoff, you can find good value taking Washington. And you may say, well, they're not ranked yet and they've got a month to go. How can they go from unranked to 12? I'm going to give you a little reminder here that after this week, that AP poll, you may as well just crumble it up, toss it in the trash can because it doesn't matter anymore. College football playoff rankings are going to come out. And I'm telling you, the college football playoff is going to have Washington ranked. Washington 7-2, or they'll be 6-2 because they're off this week. Washington will be ranked in those first rankings. Washington is a team to keep your eye on. Jed Fish, what he's doing, he's going to be a name that's going to get floated around in coaching circles. That is a team to keep your eye on. That's a team that you can take value to get to the college football playoff. I like what Washington is doing. Buy stock. Okay. Last team I want to talk about before we get into this lovely, lovely AP poll is Michigan. Similar to Washington, Michigan could get set up at 9-2 with a top-ranked team coming in to their house on November 29th. Michigan beat Michigan State in the rivalry game. They now have Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland before Ohio State. Michigan's going to be 9-2 going into that game, going into the game against Ohio State. That will be a win and in game for the Wolverines for the college football playoff. And if you remember, in the summer, I told you that this was possible. And it's possible. It's going to happen. They're going to have a win and in scenario for the college football playoff. I'm not telling you to book it that they win. I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm letting you know that as unflashy as the offense is, the schedule was always favorable. It was always favorable. 9-3 with the talent that you have there should be the average that you go in this schedule. 8-4 would have been disappointing. 10-2 would have been great. 9-3 made the most sense. But 10-2 is possible. 8-4 is possible if they get upset. But Michigan is a team that's going to play their way into a chance to go to the college football playoff. What if they play Ohio State tight but lose? Does 9-3 Michigan have an argument? These are all things to think about. They wouldn't have a ranked win unless Washington gets ranked. So Michigan is a team that we need to watch here into November. A monster game against Ohio State looming on November 29th. AP poll time. Ohio State remains the number one team in the country. Indiana taking a few more votes this week after absolutely rolling over UCLA. Fernando Mendoza, probably the Heisman favorite right now. And then Ty Simpson and Julian Sayin sitting there right behind him. What a battle that's going to be over the month of November. Hopefully we get a head-to-head matchup there with Mendoza and Sayin in the Big Ten championship game to really see some fireworks. But my goodness gracious, Fernando Mendoza in Indiana playing extremely good football. That is a legitimate contender. I was holding on before saying that about Indiana, And over the last couple of weeks, they have convinced me that this team is absolutely legit and can win the national title. Texas A&M gets a first place vote. They're sitting at number 3. Alabama, Georgia, Oregon. Haven't really had a complaint there yet. Ole Miss sitting at 7. Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt, and BYU at 10. Miami also tie for 10. They'll be sitting there at 11 with the tiebreaker. Notre Dame, keep your eyes on the Irish. They're going to make the college football playoff. They're going to win out. They're going to get in. That offense with CJ Carr, Jadarian Price, and Jeremiah Love, outstanding. If Notre Dame can figure out that defense, put the pieces together, that team can play for a national championship again. Yes, I know you left them for dead, not me. You left them for dead earlier in the season, 0-2. No. Marcus Freeman and that program have good players. They have good coaches. They needed a second to figure it out. Their schedule was always difficult for them at the beginning because it's hard to play back-to-back road games against 2 top 10 teams who are top 10 teams right now in Miami and Texas A&M. They lost those games by a combined 4 points. Notre Dame is a great football team. They're going to be in the college football playoff. Watch out for the Irish. Texas Tech, another team. They're sitting at 13. They are in the driver's seat of the Big 12 if they get their quarterback back and he stays healthy. Virginia sitting there in the ACC. Louisville sitting there in the ACC, 15 and 16. Cincinnati, Oklahoma, Missouri, Texas, that's 17 through 20. 21 to 25. Michigan, Houston, USC, Utah, Memphis. What teams did I not mention that you think should be mentioned? I'm going to tell you anyway. Washington, Iowa, Tulane. I think those 3 teams should be ranked. Tulane, I think, is the best G5 team. And I think Washington and Iowa should both be ranked. I'm going to tell you why they're not ranked. The AP poll voters don't watch them. They don't. They do not watch those teams play. I can guarantee you. If you watched Iowa play throughout this last month and what they did to Penn State, don't tell me that Penn State's a 4-loss team. Penn State has the talent of a top 10 team. They are broken inside, but they have the talent of a top 10 team. And Iowa beat them. Iowa should be ranked. Washington should be ranked. These are things that will be fixed, in my judgment, when the college football playoff rankings come out next week. Keep your eye on this because I'm going to tell you, Iowa is sitting right now at 6-2. Iowa's schedule. You're going to tell me that Iowa can't get to the college football playoff? Their next game is against Oregon. Oregon has to go to Kinnick. Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon. You get to go to Kinnick and experience that stadium. Hopefully it's a night game just for theatrics so you can really experience the fullness of what it's like playing in Iowa. Iowa has to play USC, Michigan State, and Nebraska. If Iowa runs the table and goes 10-2, they will be a borderline playoff team because you would now be beating number 6 Oregon, number 23 USC. I don't think they're going to get to the college football playoff, but I'm telling you that they have a path. And that's another team that you can look at and say, man, they beat Oregon. Watch out. That team could be in the playoff. So I want you to keep your eye on Iowa. I want you to keep your eye on Washington. We're going to have a lot more for you on the show on Thursday. A big slate of games that we have ahead for us in week 10. The games you remember are played in November. We say it every single year. Yes, has a little bit of luster been lost from Ohio State, Penn State? Sure. I still think that's going to be a competitive football game. We're going to see what mettle Penn State has left inside that program. Vanderbilt at Texas, Miami, SMU, a big ACC game. There's some good ones across the slate. Georgia, Florida, the world's largest cocktail party. Oklahoma, Tennessee. That's a big game in the SEC race. USC, Nebraska. A huge one for Matt Rule and Lincoln Riley. The winner of that going to be in really good position. That's a night game in Memorial Stadium. So that place is going to be on fire. And College Game Day going to be at Cincinnati, Utah. So again, a lot to get to on the Thursday show. We will have more for you on Thursday. So guys, thank you for listening to today's show. Again, Brian Kelly has been fired from LSU. That's the leading storyline from this past weekend of college football. And again, I said in the opener, it may have felt stale to you this weekend, but college football doesn't disappoint. There's always something going on. The coaching carousel continues to be one of the hottest storylines of the season. It's only going to get hotter. Stay tuned here to our socials at Saturday Cadence at T Silver Bulletin, website tsilverbulletin.com. Guys, appreciate you listening to today's show. We will see you on Thursday. In the meantime, God bless.